This is my friend Josefina Santacruz, one of Mexico's most talented chefs. She's run her own kitchens in very modern, progressive restaurants from New York to Mexico City. But she's also a big proponent of honoring the traditional methods of the past. I've heard her say that no matter how fancy you're cooking, you need to know how to cook a good pot of beans. Look at all these different kinds of beans. You know, the cool thing I think is that you can get these now.
Now, exactly.
Now,
it used to be like just like beans and mole, but it's like this beans.
This bean, because that's a really classic thing from Oaxaca,
exactly.
is to do this bean, this, yeah.
And they have it white, which I hadn't seen.
Oh, yeah.
I think Mexicans are trying to pick up
it's
our traditions.
Reclaiming something that's native to here, that
Exactly.
there's incredible variety, beautiful flavors, different textures in each one of them. And I think that's a really important thing to
Exactly,
hold
and
on.
each bean, it has its own, character and whatever. It's not just like beans and buy whatever bean. It's like, you want to buy this one's for enchiladas or this one's for mole or this, which is cool, which is nice, yeah.
Beans have long been an integral ingredient of traditional Mexican cooking. And it's been the women known as mayoras who have passed down the knowledge for preparing this traditional Mexican fare. This is really the case at Nico's, where the kitchen's mayora, Doña Guillermina, serves up hearty dishes, even in a city known for its modern high-end dining. One of my favorite things that comes out of her kitchen is a simple bean soup that she makes using 3 different kinds of heirloom beans. Doña Guillermina starts with those large white runner beans that are becoming popular again here in Mexico. After cooking the runner beans, she adds a spoon of calcium hydroxide, what they call cal here, to release their thick skins. Once the skins are off, she sets those beans aside. She cooks the other beans in a large pot with a whole onion and a whole head of garlic. Once they're done, she adds the white runner beans to the pot. Doña Guillermina seasons her soup with a large handful of epazote and some salt. This fantastic soup is served tableside over dried chili, crispy tortilla strips, and crumbled queso fresco. Another restaurant in Mexico City that takes tradition to heart is Yuban. Here, Chef Paloma Ortiz has taken classic flavors from Oaxaca and elevated them to high-end dining. Her unique background as a formally trained chef who has learned so much from the mayoras has inspired her to serve food that is a perfect blend of traditional and modern. One of these dishes is her black mole, served with perfectly cooked venison. Now talk to me about how you understand the word mayora.
For some reason, I think mayora was the word, I guess chef was just for males. The chef was the French guy, usually the European guy that ran the kitchen, but mayoras would be like in charge of a certain area. Sometimes we're in charge of family meals.
But they had to have a lot of skill.
A lot, of course. So,
and a huge amount of knowledge.
So
and when I go to Oaxaca and I go into these very traditional restaurants, it's almost always the women that are running those kitchens, and they're always referred to as the mayora, the keeper of the knowledge, the person that really knows what's going on. And nowadays, you've got all these young chefs coming out of culinary school.
And they feel they're chefs. They're not even mayoras.
They're not mayoras, and half of them are women, but they're not calling themselves mayoras, right? Or do I not know the full story?
No, I think you're right.
Do you think that you'll ever see these young female chefs coming out of culinary school and calling themselves mayoras?
I don't think so, and I think we should because the mayora is a chef, and they probably know a lot more than the ones that have been to culinary school. I think in Mexican food, mayoras know a lot more than any of us that have been to, and I include myself, to culinary school.
Well, it's so interesting to me that the chef here went to culinary school, and then she decided she wanted to go deeply into the cuisine of Oaxaca. So what did she do? She went to Oaxaca and cooked with the mayoras.
Exacto, and she learned from them.
And she learned from them. And here she is, I don't know, adding culinary school polish, maybe we could say?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know, but when you taste the mole...
venison, medium rare, but the mole is from a mayora.
So when I came to Mexico for the first time and started studying the cuisine, the only people that I could learn, because I wanted to learn traditional cuisine and I couldn't go, I went to look for culinary schools that could teach it to me, and I couldn't find anything at all. And so where did I go? I went to the markets, to the fondas, and I learned from the mayoras that ran those fondas because they could tell you everything.
Exactly.
They had all the knowledge. They'd make stuff right in front of me. They'd get the ingredients together. They'd say this ingredient, not that ingredient. And I learned so much from them.
And probably not with a recipe in hand, this much of this, but it's they just know. They know like this much. In Spanish, and I'm sure you've bumped into this, people will say, oh, it asks for more salt. Pide más sal. Quiere más canela. Like, it wants more of this, like as if the sauce was speaking. No?
But it is.
And it is. I know.
When you're creating this, all you're doing is shepherding this sauce into its perfect existence, and it'll tell you what it wants. All the time, the different ingredients are going to change depending on the season, how they were grown, how ripe they are, and everything. So cooking is really that interaction of the cook and the dish.
I'm sure you've noticed in Mexico lately, there are a lot of chefs, male chefs, cooking Mexican food.
Yes.
Which 20 years ago, male chefs were cooking French, Italian, or whatever. And there are certain things that have been always a female thing, like making sopes, like tortillas, sopes, tamales. Tlacoyos are like women do that. And men make la barbacoa, the carnitas, la birria. No?
So have you ever been to a barbacoa restaurant that was run by a woman?
Nope, ever.
I haven't either, or seen.
No, I think it's really one of those things that's a male thing.
Barbacoa, that slow-cooked lamb done in a pit underground, is such a classic Mexican dish. And here on his ranch in the state of Hidalgo, Josefina's friend Moises Rodriguez Vargas is making some of the best barbacoa in the world to bring back to his Mexico City restaurant. His careful process starts with lamb that he raises himself. ¿Y cuando están en el rancho, están afuera?
Sí, afuera, están en corrales grandes, pero ya caminan y regresan y andan libres.
Pero les tienes comederos.
Ah, sí, hay comederos, bebederos y ya solo...
Son muy alegres.
Sí, mira que realmente ese es el aspecto que hay que cuidar del animal, que no esté estresado para que te dé vida, que no esté con tensión para que te dé el mejor rendimiento. Cuando un animal no está tenso desde la vida, la carne es maravillosa al final del platillo.
Estoy seguro de eso.
Sí, no, eso es definitivo.
Este es un sabor que puedes notar.
Y es que todo está en el trato que le das de vida al animal y la alimentación. Y yo cargo mucho la forma de alimentar porque es sana. Esta aquí es sana, es maíz, trigo, sorgo, cebada, alfalfa chacalada, avena, zacate.
Moises continues to respect the animals through the butchering process. You can tell even before it's cooked that this is really exceptional meat.
2 costillas, el espinazo, el cuello, que es tu parte preferida, es esta, y el lomo. El lomo se limpia porque sí tiene un exceso de grasa en esta parte, pero los riñones se dejan para poder seguir trabajando.
Pero hasta el color de la grasa es...
Sí, es que es de grano, es de grano, es una grasa natural, o sea, de alimento de grano natural sano.
Sí, no es amarilloso, como rancio.
Exacto, esa es la garantía que te da comer una carne de ese tipo.
The fire is lit inside the pit, and maguey leaves are roasted over the heat. Once the wood burns down to coals, the lamb is cooked inside the pit, wrapped in those roasted maguey leaves. The pit is sealed off with a layer of dirt.
¿Cuántos le pones ahí?
Aquí caben 18 borregos.
18 borregos, o sea, ¿cuántos kilos? La matemática ya se me olvidó. ¿Cómo era? ¿Cuántos kilos?
40, 45 kilos por carnero.
40, vamos a hacerlo fácil. 40 por 18.
Es mucha carne. Digamos, es mucho carne. After about 8 hours or so inside the pit, that meat is ready to eat.
Oh my God. Oh, luego es deliciosa la cabeza. Lástima que no hay una tortilla aquí.
Moises serves the barbacoa at his restaurant El Hidalguense. And at this homey, family-style restaurant, you can also find classic Mexican fare like sopes, michiotes, the toasted maguey worms, and all kinds of offal. But the star of the show? Well, that's the fall-apart tender, pit-roasted lamb barbacoa. A lot of the young chefs, on their sort of high-end modern Mexican menus are putting barbacoa.
Exactly.
Barbacoa of everything you could imagine.
I find it like it's very weird. We're going back to the basics in a certain way. It's like barbacoa. You know, it's barbacoa you would find in any stall in any market. And now, like you say, in most of the fancy high-end restaurants, you have barbacoa or you have even suadero.
It's interesting to me, though, to think about that because have you ever tasted one that's this good?
I do have a little problem with, like, not a problem, I just feel that there are certain things that you cannot do in a high-end restaurant just because the entire process of making this barbacoa cannot be done in one of those high-end restaurants just because the hole and the time and la penca and everything. So
This is, I think, one of the hardest things in the world to make. Because everything's got to be right. The meat's got to be right. You have to char it just right. You have to have just the right kind of wood to cook with. You have to have just the right pit to cook it in. It's like master of barbecue in the United States.
exactly.
There's not very many people that do it perfectly well. And this guy does it perfectly well.
Even the tortillas. I've been to some of these high-end restaurants sometimes, and they give you something that's supposed to be a great taco with a great this, but the tortilla didn't even puff. People underestimate, and sometimes chefs underestimate. Oh, it's just masa, you know, it's a tortilla, and I'll put something really nice on top, and it's like, but it's the base of whatever
So I have
you're
a
doing.
question about the tortilla. So in culinary school, if you show a guy how to make bread, man, he's right there. He's going to make the best loaf of bread you've ever tasted. Show a guy to make a tortilla.
It's not that easy. A tortilla, no one can tell you what exact minute you have to turn it, right? It's a feeling thing. Because then, I mean, at least to me, whenever I get to a tortilla to finally puff, I get really excited. Because you see the ladies, they kind of touch it like this and kind of get a feeling of, and then they turn it, and then they do it again, and poof, it puffs.
And
it's
puffs.
beautiful.
So when the chefs go to culinary school here, you know, it's the same thing all over the world. There's this curriculum for international cuisine.
Yeah.
You learn all the basics of international cuisine. But do you think that every chef coming out of culinary school in Mexico should be able to make certain dishes of the native cuisine of the classic Mexican cuisine?
I think so, because
Or what should they know? Which few
I think they
dishes?
should know. I think they should know how to make tortillas. I think they should know how to make rice, plain rice, really. Arroz blanco, a good bowl of, good beans, and everybody's like, oh, beans.
I'm glad you said it because
beans.
that was going to be in my
Beans.
list. I was going to say that.
Don't you think? I mean, sometimes you can just have beans that are so beautiful that you're like, all I can have is beans and tortillas, and that's it. And sometimes it's like, they're hard, they're not salty, they're just weak, they're like loose, I don't know.
Not enough fat, not the right kind of
exactly.
fat. Not enough onion or garlic or whatever you want to
Or
put
whatever,
in it to
or,
season.
you know, I don't know, avocado leaf or something.
Yes.
I think probably mole. Just because mole is one of these things that's so traditional. I mean, I don't. There's so many different moles, you know, but at least one. At least know that.
So, are there any other dishes? You gave me 4 super classic things.
I think
Tortillas,
carnitas.
beans, rice. Okay.
Carnitas, I think
Okay.
carnitas.
So we had tortillas, beans, rice, mole, and carnitas.
I think so. Yeah.
A good
Well, probably barbacoa, pero carnitas.
Well, I was going to ask you, should barbacoa be on there? I almost think it should be.
Yeah. I just think in every cuisine, before you fool around with it, you need to know the basics.
You sure do. Barbacoa is absolutely one of my favorite dishes in Mexico. But traditionally, it is made in a pit in the ground. So it sort of seems like it's just out of reach for most home cooks in the United States. But when you really take it apart, it is meat that is wrapped in some aromatic leaves and then slowly cooked. So we can slow cook in our kitchens. I mean, I could do it in the oven or I can do it in my slow cooker, which is my appliance of choice here. But first, let's talk about the aromatic leaves. Now, typically, a barbacoa in central Mexico will be done in the large penca de maguey or agave leaf. And thankfully, At the Mexican grocery store around the corner from my house, they're selling these now. So maybe you want to see if you can lay your hands on that. Other parts of Mexico, pit-cooked meat will be cooked in banana leaves. Those are readily available in Mexican and Asian and specialty grocery stores. And in central Mexico and southern Mexico, they use a lot of avocado leaves, which are also very readily available in the Mexican markets. So to start off my barbacoa here, the first thing that I'm going to do, since I have this maguey leaf, is to cut off a chunk of it and show you how you work with it. So I'm going to cut through it. It's very fibrous, and I will tell you that on the part of it that is exposed now, you don't want to touch that part of it because it could give a rash to your hand. And I'm going to soften it by putting it onto an open flame like we were roasting a chili here. And I'm just going to sort of char it and soften it. Then we're going to cut it up and use it to line the slow cooker. Now, my slow cooker is one that has the insert that you can take out. I have a shoulder roast of lamb. Central Mexico, they make barbacoa out of lamb. In the southern part of Mexico, they use a lot of goat. Northern part of Mexico, they're using a lot of beef. I want to brown this because when you're doing pit cooking, you get the pit really hot. Then you put the leaf wrapped meat in there when it's super hot, but then it starts to cool down and slowly cook. So I'm going to get the initial sear in my slow cooker by adding a little bit of oil to the bottom of the pot. I'm going to sprinkle this meat with some salt, then lay it down into the pot. Let's see if it's hot enough. Yeah, I got a nice little sizzle going on there. More salt over the top. I'm going to brown the lamb on all sides and then continue to roast the maguey until it's softened. It'll blacken in the process. We got browned meat and we've got the softened and charred leaf there. Now onto the flavorings that go into this. So this is kind of a classic red chili marinade that I'm doing, but I'm going to actually thin it out some to make it a braising liquid. And it's going to start with some herbs and spices. We've got the Mexican oregano and cinnamon that are going to go in here. A little bit of dark brown sugar, or you could use piloncillo. Garlic, of course. A little vinegar for tang. Smokiness comes from chipotle chilies. And then we have 2 dried chilies. The guajillo for brightness and the ancho for deep, rich sweetness. The first thing that I need to do with these ingredients, of course, is to clean the chilies. So pull out the stems, open them up, let the seeds fall out. I'm not going to be terribly careful about getting every one of them out because I'm going to strain this mixture in a minute. Then the vinegar and a chipotle chili, and then the rest of our ingredients. The canela, the dark brown sugar, oregano and garlic. Then I've got 2 cups of water and I'm going to blend it until it's completely smooth. That'll take a minute or 2. I'm going to strain this through a medium mesh sieve over my lamb. Press that all through with a spatula. Now to this softened maguey leaf. I'm going to cut it into 3 pieces. There we go. And just nestle them down in here. What are they going to give? A little bit of char flavor, so it's going to add a rustic quality. And then they're also going to give the herbal element that cooking in maguey leaves does. Now, back onto the slow cooker. Grab it here and put it on, and the top on, and I'm going to cook that for about 6 hours on high. My favorite way to cook beans is also in the slow cooker. I mean, it keeps the temperature just perfect, just below a simmer, so that the beans come out incredibly creamy textured. That's what I really love about them. And I'm going to show you how to make a dish in the slow cooker, a bean dish. It's from northern Mexico called frijoles charros, and they're flavored with bacon, some onions, some tomatoes, some green chili. It's everyone's favorite. Now I'm using this slow cooker that has a base that we can put directly over the heat. So I'm going to put that on to about a medium temperature here and add this chopped bacon to it. And when that is starting to brown, it's rendered a lot of its fat, I'm going to add a chopped onion to it. Then when the onion has softened nicely, a few more minutes, I'm going to add to it some finely chopped garlic, a couple of chopped jalapenos, and finally a can of fire roasted diced tomatoes. Now on to the beans. In northern Mexico they typically make frijoles charros with pinto beans. But my goodness, there's so many cool heirloom beans that are available in your farmers markets and specialty groceries. Pick one, try it out, see if you like the texture, the color, the flavor of that one. Today I'm going to use those pinto beans just to show you what the classic is all about. So a pound of them will go into my slow cooker here. And then I need 7 cups of water for these beans to cook in. That will go into the slow cooker. The top will go on. And I'm going to cook this on high for 4 hours, but it'll hold for longer. One of the struggles that I have when I make rice for a big group is how to keep it warm without it overcooking to serve to the group. That's when I turn to a rice cooker, because I can have it on the keep warm function for an hour or so and the rice is in great shape. So I'm going to show you how to make the classic Mexican red tomato rice in a rice cooker. Now the flavor that we associate with that is typically tomatoes. If you use the fire roasted tomatoes, you're going to have a deeper, richer, slightly smoky flavor. Put half a can into the blender jar with 2 garlic cloves that have been blanched in a little bit of water in a microwave for 1 minute. Blend that mixture until it's smooth. Next, in the rice cooker, stir together 1.5 cups of rice. Long grain rice works best in this recipe, with 1.5 tablespoons of oil. Then add the tomato mixture to the rice, along with 1 2/3 cups chicken broth. For a little extra flavor, I like to add a whole jalapeno that I've just cut a slit in the side of. The last ingredient, a teaspoon of salt. Now I've told you the proportions of what goes into the rice cooker. Now I've got to tell you how to cook it. So flip the rice cooker on to cook, and then let it cook for a full 15 minutes. At the end of that 15 minutes, uncover it and go in and stir it very gently from top to bottom, but very gently. Put the lid back on and cook it for another 15 minutes. You'll likely have to flip it back on to cook at that point. If your rice cooker doesn't want to flip on to cook, but wants to stay on keep warm, just wait a minute. It'll eventually hold on cook. You need to cook it for another 15 minutes. At that point, you fluff the rice and it's perfect. It can stay on keep warm for, well, up to an hour. Just before serving this slow cooker meal, add some diced steamed carrots and peas to your already cooked rice. Stir it all together with some chopped fresh herbs. Parsley or cilantro is good here. To add a little more texture to the beans, spoon out 2 cups of beans and blend them until smooth. Then stir those creamy beans back into the pot, along with a little chopped cilantro and some salt. For the lamb, break up the cooked pieces into large chunks. Spread those pieces onto a platter and sprinkle them with some coarse salt. Spoon that beautiful pan juice over the lamb to add moisture, and you're ready for a party.